YouTube is telling me that we might be live right now, but I don't see my face yet. We are live. We did it. We've achieved something great here today. So, audience, welcome everyone. I have a very special guest here on the eve of the launch of Mechwarrior 5 Clans, and that is narrative director Chris Lowrey. Welcome
Hey, everyone.
aboard, Chris.
How's it going?
So, Chris, I hear you did a lot of work involving Mechwarrior 5 Clans.
Oh, yes. Quite a bit.
So, it's like, yes, in fact, that's the whole reason I'm here.
Oh, yeah.
But I just wanted to ask a couple questions here just to get things started. When did you really start with Mechwarrior and Battletech in terms of appreciating the genre or the property?
So how I got into Battletech itself?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, man, this is a long story. So back in this magical time called the 1980s, I was young and in the Boy Scouts, and much like a lot of kids in the 80s, I really liked Star Wars. Specifically at the time, The Empire Strikes Back. And I specifically remember, being at Boy Scout camp and, having a rainy day and, not bringing anything because, I'm an 8-year-old kid. And one of the older kids actually brought his copy of Technical Readout 3025. And my 8-year-old mind at the time, basically associated specifically the Goliath mech in that original illustration with effectively the AT-AT walkers from Star Wars. And I pretty much, credit to my parents, they, after that camp and after, begging for it, they actually did find a copy of the initial box set. I think it was the third edition box set with all the plastic miniatures in it, and pretty much that was all she wrote.
Nice. I also got in at 8 years old, so just a few years after you, though. I got in 94. So, only at the best time, actually. No, I'm kidding. So, with that introduction out of the way, in terms of letting everybody know that you have a long-standing history with Battletech,
Oh, yes.
this is probably the most common question you get asked, and it is a question that I have to ask. Why smoke Jaguar?
So, to answer that, we have to kind of go back at Mechwarrior 5 Mercs and kind of what Mercs was in the grand scheme of Mechwarrior properties. So, at the time of Merc's development, it was probably 15 years or something like that since Mechwarrior 4 Mercs came out.
Yep.
And so, general perception or just the general knowledge of the Battletech universe within the video game space is virtually non-existent at that point, because it's one of those things where the Mechwarrior games were big enough to be successful, but not really big enough to really enter the common video game zeitgeist to where they stuck around for
everybody knows who Sarah Kerrigan is, but I understand.
Yeah, so it wasn't as big as StarCraft or any of those other ones, or Halo or any of those other sci-fi franchises within the video game space. So when it came to Mercs, after MechWarrior Online pretty much paved the way for us to even consider making Mercs. The big thing that Russ really wanted was he really wanted a spiritual successor to Mechwarrior 1, which was the Mechwarrior that he grew up with as a kid, and was pretty much a unique Mechwarrior game in the fact that at the time it was the only Mechwarrior game that was truly a sandbox experience. The other Mechwarrior Merc games, from Mechwarrior 2 Mercs to Mechwarrior 4 Mercs, are really just linear experiences with specific branching paths where you can have an option to take certain contracts at that specific moment, but in taking a contract it's going to run out time on another contract, and so you kind of had these arcing branches just based on that. But the overall experience itself was still purely linear. You're going to Galatea and you're picking up these contracts, then you're kind of going to the planet and executing them.
Yeah.
And what Russ really wanted to do was he wanted to pretty much remake Mechwarrior 1, which was actually truly a sandbox experience to like take your jump ship and fly around the inner sphere and take contracts pretty much anywhere you go. So we pretty much returned everything back to the Succession Wars because that's
That's when
gives
MechWarrior 1
us.
takes place, too. MechWarrior 1 is a Succession Wars game, yeah.
Yep, and and specifically with the intent that that is pretty much where this franchise really got its roots from. It's where it's kind of the era that kicked off everything, and although like the game itself was something that Russ really was pushing for a sandbox experience, to kind of recreate what there was in MechWarrior 1. The other kind of side of that is that it is like literally the ground floor on which all of Battletech's storytelling kind of derives from. So it's in of itself kind of a grand introduction that allows players who are not familiar with this setting or not familiar with 40 years of the IP to kind of have a way to onboard themselves and get familiar with this world, and so we can do some storytelling in that world. And that's pretty much where MechWarrior 5 came in. So fast forward a bit to the DLCs, where I was, pretty much given the narrative director position. For those DLCs, like we really wanted to, like we had the sandbox experience, but people were like demanding much more of like the storytelling aspect that the universe is known for, and so we started crafting, those. DLC stories to really capitalize on some of the bigger moments and give people a taste of the storytelling that can be done in this universe when given the opportunity, given like its rich history and whatnot. Thanks to tremendous support from everyone involved and all of you guys who have picked it up. We were very fortunate to do as many DLCs as we did. And by the time we got to the Solera Showdown one, making kind of like the side story with Duncan Fisher and everything
Duncan
like
Fisher
that.
here.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah. But by that time, like we had a sandbox kind of time box of 3015 all the way up to 3049, and although like there's still some stuff in like from 3015 to 3028 is kind of bare as far as like having it just be a purely sandbox experience. We have kind of filled up the timeline from the 3020s all the way up into the early 3040s. So yeah, like that's all due to the support that we've got from the Mechwarrior Mercs DLCs and whatnot. But so naturally, with 3049 kind of rolling up, everyone who is a long-term fan of this franchise knows that there's a big event pretty much happens around that time.
Does it
That kind of
involve
kicks off.
someone being revived? Revival in some way, you might say?
Oh, yep, very much so. And it involves pretty much like a long, kind of through line that has kind of been in the background of a lot of the storytelling in the Succession Wars to really come to fruition, and that is pretty much getting out of the Succession War era and entering into what's known as the Clan Invasion era. And so very much like how MechWarrior 5 Mercs was meant as an onboarding spot for this particular universe for people who never grew up with MechWarrior, like those more long-term fans, and for fans who just came to this universe through either MWO or MechWarrior 5 Mercs. MechWarrior 5 Clans is very much built in a similar structure. Like we are, constructing the campaign and constructing the story around, pretty much people becoming familiar with who the clans are, why they're doing what they're doing, and like what is, the core thrust of, this particular storytelling. And I'm getting around, and that's like pretty much where the Smoke Jaguars come into it, because in the grand scheme of the Clan Invasion stories, you can't really tell the story of the Clan Invasion without telling the story of Clan Smoke Jaguar. There is a lot of very key moments that happen in the invasion, from the inception of the invasion all the way up to its resolution, that is deeply ingrained with the events that happen directly in Smoke Jaguar. And if we chose any other clan, like if we like chose to center it on Clan Wolf or Clan Jade Falcon, like one, we would have to be competing with a lot of the pre-written material that is already out there, which boxes us in as designers. But also we would still have to be telling the story of Smoke Jaguar, because it's so much of what happens in the invasion is so vital to what happens directly with their storytelling. And so by centering them as our headlining faction, rather than kind of having this important stuff kind of off to the sidelines, we're allowing players to get right into the thick of it and kind of experience it firsthand.
That is something that I also just wanted to add real quick. The thing I love about the fact you guys doing the Jaguars is that if you go to the 1,000-mile high view, if you're not at the ground level, because at the ground level in terms of fiction, you're right, we've gotten Wolf and Jade Falcon mostly for that era, but they're actually not the main protagonists, in the sense of they're not the ones actually making things happen for the most part. The clan invasion is really the story of Clan Smoke Jaguar. Like, at its core, it is about Smoke Jaguar. Even the two of the three most important battles are Smoke Jaguar battles.
Yeah. The Clan Wolf story does play a part in the resolution of like the invasion, but like to tell the story of what led into the invasion and like what the invasion meant to the clans at the height of it, you have to tell the story of Clan Smoke Jaguar, since they're so central to everything that happens within that particular era of this universe.
Awesome. Well, as you can tell, I'm excited.
Oh yes.
So obviously now we know why you guys chose Clan Smoke Jaguar. So let's ask a bit of a question about the cast. What went into constructing the cast, basically the cast of characters that we're going to be playing? Because if I'm not mistaken, we're playing as a star of characters. You'll forgive me because I haven't played the game, obviously. I can't immediately commit their names to memory. But that will change after. The only one I remember is, I think it's Mia, and that's because she looks crazy, and her trailer made her seem extraordinarily Smoke Jaguar in nature. But what inspired these characters for you guys to really make them the core focus that the players are going to be interacting with?
So, kind of going back to onboarding the new players, and also kind of heralding back to that storytelling that you found in Mechwarrior 2. Like, we really wanted to kind of emulate that very familiar storytelling that, most players are familiar with the last time you saw, a clan-centered game. So, going all the way back to Mechwarrior 2, that game starts you off in your Sibco for your tutorial missions, which are very, very, very long and arduous, and we're not going to go like that minute to where like there's entire tutorials around setting nav points and following them and stuff like that. But the general idea of kind of onboarding you into the clan world through putting you in the perspective of the Sibco trainee and allowing things to kind of naturally absorb through the storytelling was something that we really carried over from the Mechwarrior 2 games. And as far as what we were doing with our storytelling, a lot of that, I'm a game designer first, and so a lot of the traits of the characters that we've picked are very selectively chosen so we could do very specific things within the story. Some of those things are to help explain kind of like who the clans are as a people, and kind of explain certain things, like for example Liam's specific character tick of using contractions is
what a monster. How dare he. Yes. It disgusted me. I was disgusted when I saw that trailer. I looked into the eyes of a monster.
But you see, the thing is that you talk to someone with 30, 40 years of experience within this franchise, and they get exactly why that is a bad thing. But if you basically just come at someone who's uninitiated to this world and just say, oh, clans can't use contractions, and we're just going to straight face go right into that, then it becomes a lot more difficult to really like have them understand like why. To them, it just plays off as weird. And so
can you imagine the player sitting there? He's like just staring at the screen like, what?
Yeah. So 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 kind of having a character tick like that that allows us to, one kind of bend and break the rules, because I'll tell you this from experience, like having a core cast of actual human beings that speak English and not clan. It does make it very difficult to talk like a clanner a lot, especially within the time constraints and the budget constraints that we have on our production. So kind of having that vehicle to kind of like be almost like a pressure release valve for that kind of content is good. But most importantly, he has a tick like that because it allows us to explain to the people who don't get it, this is why this exists in this universe, and this is like how people react to it. And we allow him to be the way he is in order for him to kind of bounce off other characters in the story, so you can see what the ramifications are for having a character that's like that within the context of the Jaguars.
It's awesome. And again, that's actually probably my favorite trailer out of the ones you guys have shown off so far. Just because, like, as soon as I even heard him speaking with contractions, like, for the first few seconds, I was like, is this guy for real? Followed by immediately, like, obviously the trailer moving into it. Like, you can't do that, bro.
I feel so bad for Darren and Matt, our marketing team, and our community service team, because like Liam was one of, I think he was like the third or fourth trailer that we released, and so there was like a few trailers that came in before him where like he was pretty much talking with contractions, and people were like pointing out, going, "Oh my God, you guys don't get it. This is the way the comedians talk. How dare you?" But it was really just like, no, I'm sorry, guys. It'll make sense when we get around to him.
So far, we have a cast of characters that you guys have designed to help ease the player into the narrative. We have a game that is centered on really like the main perpetrator, if you will, of Operation Revival. That sounds incredibly exciting to me. It also sounds like it's the one story that we didn't get in Mechwarrior 2. Like, like if we look at, the primary, like, obviously there was Ghost Bear's Legacy, which covered Ghost Bear, and which isn't a direct, like, super clan invasion story, but at least it's a Ghost Bear-centric story. And then we have Jade Falcon and Wolf obviously playing their roles in the initial game. So, was that also a consideration when you guys were putting this together?
It was the consideration I definitely put forward to pitch it to Russ to get it in, and I think that from a business perspective, that was like the most attractive thing for him, is that we are kind of finding this missing hole within the grand scheme of MechWarrior product out there, to pretty much do it. But ultimately, for me personally, I was pushing hard for the Jaguars more from the storytelling perspective when it comes to telling the story of the clans and how central the Jaguars are when it comes to telling that particular story.
I'm trying to think of a good follow-up question. I'll take a question or two from the audience. Hold on. I have Discord, I swear. Incoming. So I have a moderator who's filtering through questions that are likely ones you can actually answer. If I were to do it, we have 165 people in here right now. By the way, hello everyone. I hope you're all enjoying the stream so far. I hope this has been informative. Just while we're waiting, there we go. Was there any significant differences beside the obvious between working on this game and prior work that you've done?
I mean, are we talking about just MechWarrior work or just general career work?
General career work. General career.
Oh man! Well, as you can see behind me with my little corner of the apartment, that's pretty much my work corner. This is something that I have, this is an IP that I've been in for quite a bit, and it sure beats, for me personally, it's like definitely the most rewarding work I've done. I've worked on, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2.
That was a great game.
Oh yeah, I was. way back in the PS2, early PS3 days. But so I've worked on Marvel games. I've worked with Ice Age and Pixar properties and like other IPs. But I was never a comics guy growing up. I was never like too much into animation. I had friends who were really into that. But for me, like I grew up with Battletech and sci-fi like Dune and Star Wars and stuff like that. So those have always been kind of what I've gravitated towards. So this particular position is definitely like a highlight of my career so far.
That was a great answer. And I have another question.
Of
uh,
course.
is there? Do you have any plans for future DLC for MechWarrior 5?
We can't talk about any future plans for DLC until we kind of
See where the game.
get out of the release windows. So trust me, we would love to support clans just like we've supported MechWarrior 5 Mercs. But a lot of that is going to come down to you guys and to everyone else who picks up the game, because for the most part, DLC, just like for any game, is going to really be dependent on how much support there is for the core product, and that's going to dictate how big the scope is, how much ambition we can have when it comes to tackling stuff. Like it could be the difference between expanding the story from the core cast of characters that we have, or going all the way up to doing like another clan, or like doing some other like aspect of moving the story forward even further than where we eventually end the game. So like all that is definitely being evaluated now. But as far as like when we'll know more, it's really going to have to come after that release window and when we see how much core support there is for the product.
One thing that I think, just looking at all of like the trailers and stuff you guys have dropped, is the production values on this game look spectacular so far. Like, just especially compared to prior, like, even all the way back to like MechWarrior 4 releases. Like, just taking the production value of that time and translating it over to now. Like, even if we were to do like, yeah, it's not identical, but like just the scale of trying to get things looking correct, or using like mocap for actors, or even like the ships that have been shown off recently, which just look bananas, like in those cinematic shots. Like you guys have really like just from a narrative production value, it looks spectacular.
Thank you. Yeah, no, the team worked very hard on it, and the clan invasion is definitely one of those highlights of the entire Battletech IP. So we definitely want to do right by this particular story in of itself. But also, we're kind of allowed to go this far because of how much support we've had for Mechwarrior 5 Mercs and the other DLC products. That this has not necessarily been like a complete burst of flipping the light switch off and on, and pretty much having this kind of production value. It really has been kind of a slow grind between building up our staff and building up our tools with the DLC products, so we can pretty much build up to where we are with this particular game.
So, I have a question here from Mechanical Frog, who is a fellow
Mm-hmm.
YouTuber and friend who does incredible content. And he
Yep.
says, will the weapons in MechWarrior 5 clans feel different than in MWO due to the lack of a need to balance for PvP competitive play?
So the clan weapons are definitely going to feel like clan weapons, but beyond that, I don't know too much of the specifics. So, like when I was initially on MechWarrior 5 Mercs, when I was working on the vanilla game, I was a systems designer that was mostly focused on balance. So, like I know the Mercs core weapon systems and those initial DLC weapons very well, because I was the guy who was pretty much putting them in and designing the values for them and everything like that. But for clans, I since the DLC, I've done less and less of like the core design work and more of the narrative direction and the kind of storytelling side. So unfortunately, I could give you like very accurate answers for those kind of questions for Mercs, but I unfortunately can't for clans, because my role as on the team has kind of shifted away from that kind of work.
One thing I will say that I love about Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries is because, like, I'm an autocannon fan. Thank
Mhm.
goodness that game has relatively balanced autocannons. Like, I
They're
actually
fun.
don't feel bad having an AC2 on a mech in Mechwarrior 5
Mhm.
clans. It's like, in a tabletop game, I'm like, this weapon is a waste of 7 tons. Look, they gave it 2 tons of ammunition just to make me mad.
I think the one of my favorite weapons that I helped tune for Mercs was the burst fire AC5, and like I really wanted to have like the triple tap of modern AR burst fires. So like we definitely tried to like get that kind of AR-15 triple bullet downrange like in very quick succession things. So like I was really happy with that, as well as like the rifles where they just have like a big impact. And the rifles were really I was the one who like pushed for those rifles mostly because they're kind of a gap filler for light ballistic slots, since they are very much like in the light and medium slot category. You can suddenly like use those fire starters with or the cicada. One of my favorites was like the cicada with like 2 machine guns, sticking 2 light rifles in there with like a
Yeah.
medium pulse laser as well. Like that was a lot of fun.
So we've also got another question here. Uh, was there any mech you felt had to be included for Smoke Jaguars, and which was your favorite edition?
Well, I mean, addition wise, so we don't have like a full mech list just yet, but I will say that as you guys know in the trailers, we did a metric ton of new modeling and new work on like the storytelling front, from the character models to the warship and aerospace fighter models. And like we felt that that was very important to to kind of supporting the storytelling that we were going for. But that also means that for those who are familiar with MechWarrior Online, like the roster is going to be very much familiar with those for MechWarrior Online. Now we still have new damage states, we have completely new cockpit models, but like we if you're familiar with the clan roster and MWO, you're probably going to be familiar with the initial roster for clans. As far as like my favorites, I think that it was definitely important to get the Shadowcat in there in the medium category, since that is like very much the Smoke Jaguar and Novacat medium mech. Same with Arctic Cheetah, like. It's one of those mechs that was kind of like retconned into pretty much. It was initially like said to only be spotted in Luthien, but then like with more recent additions, they are kind of like, oh yeah, no, it's been in there throughout the invasion. It was just never reported by the IS
Yeah,
until
yeah,
Luthien.
it's like the
So
even Jaguars 3049 production time instead of
yeah,
3052 and stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah. Well, like with the case of the Evan Jaguar, that is very much a Wave 5 mech. So it's one of those ones where like it was being tested in the homeworlds during the initial invasion, and it wasn't really put into full production until Wave 5. And even then, like it
It
was
was
only
a rare mech.
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it was common enough because like it was like pretty much a replacement for the Hellbringer, but for the Jaguars. But the thing with them is that it's not an early invasion mech. It is like specifically Wave 5 and beyond.
Yeah.
Jaguar mech.
Yeah. Hmm. We think actually, you know what? I'm going to ask the question, and it's probably the only question that I feel will have an unsatisfying answer. So you will forgive me, because because I know you're sometimes in streams, so you probably know my favorite clan mechs are all second line clan mechs. I
Hmm.
have a feeling that I'm going to be playing without many second line mechs in this game, I suspect.
Maybe I can't comment on that until
Okay,
tomorrow. So,
okay, fair enough. So,
but
let's
no, but
see. No, no, go ahead, go ahead.
like we can talk more about it after tomorrow. But yeah, we're very much aware that like from just having that stockpile of MWO models, that we have those in the wings, and it's just a question of how do we best implement that within this particular product.
So we've got Did you find it did you find it difficult to work within the established canon, or was it something, or was it more of a chance to flesh out characters and events that maybe didn't get enough attention originally? I think we kind of touched on that before, but that is a question from the audience.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, I think I've talked about this before, but generally in game production, game designers have a love-hate relationship with established IP. It can give you guardrails to kind of fit something that is satisfying in, but it also can kind of box you into its own prison depending on how rigorous you kind of need to stay boxed into that particular IP. I think a good example of this is like, does anyone remember like the old licensed Star Wars games from the SNES era, where pretty much you always are playing as Luke Skywalker. You're always playing the levels of the core fiction itself, but the levels themselves are always like platformers, like with very odd configurations, and you're blasting your way into Mos Eisley rather than sneaking in and doing all these things that are more conductive to like video game levels, but don't necessarily fit in with that particular established lore. And I think that games in general have kind of adapted and are moving away from that raw adaptation and are trying to be more conscious about trying to find appropriate niches where we build out experiences that are specifically best tailored for games. And to that end, it's the reason why like we tried to actually actively avoid the Clan Wolf and Clan Jade Falcon invasion corridors, because if we were to center, the story of Mechwarrior 5 clans on Clan Wolf, like how much of our audience is going to basically be amenable to a story that is, tailored for a gameplay experience, and how much of that audience is going to be like, oh, just adapt Blood of Karinsky trilogy and just call it a day.
Where is Phelan? Why can't I play as Phelan?
Well, and like I talked about this in the Sarna interview, where a good example of that is that the conquest of Gunsburg in the Blood Karinsky trilogy, where Phelan faces off against Tor Miraborg. That is an incredibly satisfying spot in a book. It does not make for a compelling gameplay loop within the context of a Mechwarrior title. So it's one of those things where we want to find niches that work well with the gameplay experience that we're crafting, and that's another just another reason why the Smoke Jaguars were that much more appealing to us, since they were very frequent to act out and pretty much go that direct combat route, which plays better into an experience like the Mechwarrior experience. As much as I know some of you guys would love to see an American football game between elementals and regular people in the Ghost Bear territory, it's just not necessarily like the game that we're crafting with Mechwarrior.
Not a satisfying gameplay loop.
Yeah, exactly.
So 2 questions for you. One of them is a little lighter, the other one is a little heavier. We'll start with the light one. Who is your favorite Smoke Jaguar character?
That's tough. I mean, the default one is always going to be Trent, just because like of the visual appeal of just a guy with half his face melted off and everything. But I honestly think that like in the novels, I always found Paul Moon to be like a bit more interesting. But I will say that like in researching everything for this particular game, especially as Catalyst and other people have kind of backfilled a lot of like those gaps, I am like really intrigued by like the dynamic between Leo Showers and Sarah Weaver, and kind of how their dynamic shaped what the invasion was, and also just how Sarah Weaver's story in particular is kind of interesting in that she was pretty much Leo Showers' protege that would have attained the composition once Leo Showers became Ilkhan, if it wasn't for
our boy Lincoln. Our boy Lincoln stepped in there, absolutely.
Yep, and but like that's and that's like very much something that I think is kind of interesting with the Jaguars is that within the context of this particular spot in the universe, the Jaguars are unquestionably the strongest clan of this particular era, and they effectively are so strong individually that they see themselves as just the default for of course they're going to be the ones that take Terra, like, because they're the strongest. They just know that they're going to get around to it, and that doesn't just make them outward dickish to like all the other clans, but it also makes them very very interfactional, like where there's almost an internal political game between all of like the different power brokers within the clan itself.
We see that even in the books. I won't go into any details, but like Sarah Weaver goes through some interesting turmoil in terms of her position.
Oh yeah,
Well, it goes up and down. It's
well, I think that a good one, sticking with the books that people know, like even in like Exodus Road, Trent, when after Takayad and stuff like that, he thought he had a blood name in the bag because he had a sponsor and everything, and his sponsor, for political reasons, had to withdraw because he was backing the wrong person. And when Lincolnosis comes back from the dead, like he had to withdraw his support of Trent. So there's a lot of internal division within the Clan Smoke Jaguars. But that's mostly because like the Jaguars themselves saw themselves as just de facto the strongest clan of the era, and so there was that inter rivalry because they always saw themselves as being at the top of the pile at the end of the day, and the inner rivalry was really about like the ego of who is going to be sitting on top of that pile.
and it all would have worked out too if it weren't for those pesky combiners. But so the other question is, and it's a common question I've seen in the chat, and it's one that's been forwarded over to me by Dapper. Huge thank you to Dapper for filtering the questions. Is there going to be player choice in terms of making decisions in the story?
Maybe. I don't want to spoil anything. I think Russ has already said that there is going to be a little bit of choice, both in how you customize your mechs, customize like what skills you want to put into the pilots, and what kind of upgrades you want to upgrade into. But as far as like the story, I am going to basically say that we stuck very closely to the expectations from other Mechwarrior games, as far as like the stories and how they develop. So I would say keep within that bounds, and that's like pretty much what we were shooting for initially.
Sorry, just 1 second here. Yeah, that's a perfectly fitting answer. Some of these questions I won't be able to. I do know that we won't have full answers for, just because obviously it's about 22 hours until people find out.
Oh yeah, no, that's the thing. I'll be able to talk more about it in 2 days when people have had the time to discover for themselves. But for now, go in with the expectation that we are pretty much crafting something that stands up against all the other linear MechWarrior experiences that are out there.
So another question is, and this is one, I don't know who's asked this one, but this one is interesting. I know why, because I think Russ answered this in another interview, and I've just been a Battletech fan for 30 years, so I kind of know. Why did you guys choose to name it Mechwarrior 5 Clans and not Mechwarrior 6?
I think Russ has to give more of the official answer, since there is a business element to this. But as many people have said, there is precedent and there is history with MechWarrior 5 always having kind of more of like the linear story core game, and then the more open-ended or more realistically branching paths of the mercenary games. And we just ended up tackling the mercenaries first and having that be much more open world rather than branching paths. And for this one, we're kind of going back to more of like that linear storytelling that Mechwarrior is known for.
Yeah.
There is also a business aspect of that that I can't really talk about. That's more of something that Russ would have to talk about.
Yep, that's so not a problem. But I will just say to the chat, Mechwarrior 2, Mechwarrior 2 Ghost Bear's Legacy, Mechwarrior 2 Mercenaries. Mercenaries was a separate game. Mechwarrior 4 Vengeance, Mechwarrior 4 Black Knight. I believe both Black Knight and Mechwarrior 4 Mercenaries were standalone games. So just saying that I'm not, of course, I'm not speaking for PGI, but I do want to point out that just in the history of the franchise, it is quite common for the number to not necessarily be as important as the aftertitle or the subtitle. I can't. Oh, sorry. 1 second. People are asking a bunch of questions. I know I can't ask that question. All right.
Yeah, just to let chat know, like this is effectively going to be a non-spoiler interview, just because we want people to enjoy the game as it comes out. In 2 days' time, when everyone has like blown through the campaign, I can be free to talk about some of like the more individual aspects of the campaign then. But until then, we do want to save the surprise for people to experience the campaign organically.
To be honest, some of these questions, I'm sitting there, I'm like, I don't even want to know the answer to this. I want to play the game.
Yep.
So here is. Oh, I can't ask this one either. Come on.
So, chat, just to let you guys know, we can talk about pretty much anything that was in like the character featurettes, the early trailers, the launch trailer. Maybe not so much, because there are like, for those that know the lore, they know that like there's definitely some things that are shown in that that might spoil people if they had more context as to what you're looking at. Yeah, for the most part, we can talk about everything leading into the story, not so much what happens in the story itself.
Will we see freeborns, and how's the Jaguars treat them?
I don't want to say going into it. Like I said, we can talk more about like kind of up until
but to be fair, like I think that can be taken in the context though of like before the actual invasion, even like how the Smoke Jaguars in general tend to have quite a reputation.
Yep. So there are freeborns in the game. Most of them are probably going to be your shop clerks and the people in the background working on your mechs and everything.
Cool.
That you will pretty much see some aspects of like the freeborn treeborn dynamic, and you'll see other aspects of clan society. But what I will say is that this is again very much a focused narrative campaign that centers around that core cast of the 5-star mates as kind of like the central through line through everything, because as Big Red here can attest to, like if we have 2 hours of cinematics that we can pretty much produce and everything like that, like you can fill in that 2 hours pretty easily with just nothing but history lessons, but then you'll have no stories to actually get to the actual character development.
Can you imagine the game's just a 2-hour history lesson and there's just no gameplay after?
I mean, I figure that's what you and Text Talks are for, because you guys can definitely go into those history lessons for a bit. But that's definitely not what we're going for with the cinematics. Our cinematics are mostly focused on the character drama of these 5 individual characters within the context of the greater story. You are going to see aspects of kind of the clan fiction and how those 5 characters bounce off of everyday life within the Jaguars, and especially during the invasion. But we are definitely not going to have the time to get to every little aspect of clan society, because it is vast as far as like how much nuance we can get into.
Oh, a second here. I'm just trying to eliminate questions that I'm like, he's already answered this. or that there's no way that we will get an answer to this question. Like some of the questions have amounted to, could you spoil the entire game for us? I'm like, no.
one question I am seeing one question coming up from oh man, I cannot Dimitri. I think I can't pronounce that first name, but he's asking, can you confirm the cinemax length? I've heard 90 minutes to 120. We're definitely on the better side of the 120 length at this point in time.
Nice.
And we even have a few cinematics like that we're kind of still working on in the background that might not necessarily make the initial release, but we're aiming to get those in post-release patches. But yeah, it's definitely approaching that 2-hour length.
What were the actors' reaction when trying to speak the stilted Star League standard English?
So Rory, who plays Jaden, I think has the best reaction to that on our YouTube channel. And Rory, we love you, man. Because bless his heart, because like Rory is, he plays Jaden, our main character, and so he had probably the biggest brunt of this from all of our characters. When it came to commitment to the amount of lines and the amount of performance he had to do throughout this campaign. But yeah, he described it as pretty much a nightmare scenario because, for the most part, people don't talk like that, and especially when it comes to actors where they're really focused on performance. Getting into technicalities like the contractions rule and stuff like that, it does put in a bit of a mental block, because they want to be focused on producing the best performance that they can, and whenever we throw additional rules at them or like additional vocabulary, like it's definitely part of their job, and they're definitely professionals about it. But it took a bit to get there. There's definitely some takes where you think that, hey, like they had a great take, but man, they did that one contraction, so we have to redo the shoot for no contractions next time. So Rory, I am sorry, I did not create these rules. I swear to God, we're working with what we got within this universe.
Who is your favorite member of the Star?
Oh.
Ooh.
I know. Oh man, you're gonna get me in trouble and get me into fights with my cast.
This is what the chat actually wants. The chat wants the drama.
The drama?
They want the drama.
I think I'm gonna have to probably go with Liam just because, for as serious as the Jaguars are, we definitely try to preserve the characters of the Jaguar. But another important thing to remember about our core cast characters is that, unlike other Smoke Jaguar stories that from the fiction, or actually a lot of clan stories in the fiction, this cast of characters is not 30, 40-year veterans that are completely indoctrinated into the Jaguars. Like, they're not completely buying into it. They're teenagers, they're Simcoe trainees that are on the verge of pretty much getting into testing into their warrior status. So for the most part, they're not really, they're at that point where they may not have a say in the entire Warden Crusader divide. They don't have a say in the interior clan politics, but they're very much defaulting to their training. So they definitely take their job seriously. But with Liam, at least you get a little bit of brevity and being able to kind of tune down the volume a bit when it comes to having everything just be super serious all the time. So he definitely is a fun character to play off of for our entire cast.
So now that we have the answer for who your favorite is, if you had only 3 mates in your Star, who are you booting off?
Well, I mean, if I'm the Star Commander itself, then probably Jaden, since you can't have 2 Star Commanders in there. But
he's like, but I'm the protagonist. You're like, get out of here.
Oh, yes.
Get out of here.
Another one, I would probably pick
Oh, it's tough.
Well, I would probably pick me and Naomi. So, like, Naomi is a character that we have not gotten around to doing a character introduction, but she is the star's fifth point, and she, I guess I can, say that, because we did want to have like a bit of a character featurette with her, is that she is like the more experienced warrior when it comes to it, like the where most of your star is very much like that Sibco trainee, kind of coming out into the wider clan world, fresh off of their Sibco training. Naomi has kind of been around the block a bit, and through certain circumstances that you'll find out, in the game, you'll see like why she's pretty much at a comparable level to the star, but still at the same time, like has her head screwed on a little bit more than our core cast characters done, because she's been around the block a little bit more than what they've been.
So here's a question, and I know this one is a little bit outside of narrative. I'm trying to also keep a lot of these questions, closer to what you specifically are involved with on the game. I know that's crazy, but will there be mod support for this game like there was for Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries?
Not initially. Just like we're kind of committing to mod support in the same vein as Mechwarrior 5 Mercs, and Mechwarrior 5 Mercs didn't get official mod support out until the Steam launch, or like maybe it was a little bit sooner. I'm a little bit fuzzy on the timeline.
It wasn't right away though. I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because like right now our dev team, because like it takes a lot of effort to compile, the editor and, get all the tools together for everyone. And right now our, developers are very much focused on making sure that the launch goes as smoothly as possible. I think that Russ has said in the past that, we're still committed to, trying to get you guys the mod tools. And that doesn't necessarily stop you guys from making mods, because I know that, like Mechwarrior 5 Mercs, there were mods that were able to get published prior to the existence of those tools. But like the tools itself is very much going to be kind of a post-release item, very much like how it was for Mechwarrior 5 Mercs.
If you could make one Mechwarrior game after this one, and you have an unlimited budget, and just to preface this, if it is the era after the Civil War era, just for the purposes of the YouTube algorithm, we don't use its title. I think it's the one involving my one of my favorite factions, unfortunately. But if you had one era where you're going to be able to tell a narrative story, you have an unlimited budget, you can do whatever you want, what era would it be?
I mean, I think that it would be that era, the Holy War era, just because it's one of those things. The funny thing about that era, just as a complete aside, like I always find it funny that they call it that particular era, because the word of Blake doesn't actually use that word. It's all the media outlets that are trying to paint them as like the villain that usually uses that word. They see it as like a holy crusade themselves, and never like refer to their own campaign as like the word that era is known by.
Praise Blake. I just have to add praise Blake.
Oh yes. but in all honesty, it would be that era, because if anything, one of the bigger pains about working with in the context of the greater timeline, kind of going back and retroactively filling these holes in the Battletech timeline, is that there are fans of certain mechs and certain factions and certain narrative beats that don't exist right now. So if you are a fan of, the like the Mad Cat Mark II, for instance.
I love the Mad Cat too.
Yeah, like it's a great mech, but it's produced in the year 3062 or 65, so it's somewhere deep.
It's in the 3060s, yeah.
Yeah. So, like a mech like that, if we were to be respectful of, the IP's timeline, is not going to appear in a product like Mechwarrior 5 Clans. And I know that, same with the Blood Asp. The Blood Asp is another one where there's a lot of fans of it, but like the Blood Asp itself is like a late 30s, 60s mech. So getting those mechs into the game kind of necessitates the timeline to be in a certain spot. And I would very much like to, if I had an unlimited budget, to pretty much produce a MechWarrior product, I would, definitely try to push the timeline forward beyond what players currently know. One, because the stories can be a little bit more interesting, because I honestly don't think that the general audience really knows what happened in that particular era of the timeline. But also, it allows us to basically say, anything goes. Anything that you loved from the previous MechWarrior games, we are good to actually use in this game, and we don't have to say, yeah, we love the Blood Asp too, but it's 3050, and it's not going to be created in universe for another 15 or so years.
I would die for Celestials. I would be so happy. I could plug my pilot's head in and shorten his lifespan by decades, and I could send him out into the battlefield.
Well, Celestials are one of those that are much more viable now, because the main reason they would have been non-viable for something like MechWarrior Online is because a lot of them have melee. And they have like a lot of weird melee capabilities, like pile drivers and extendable claws and stuff like that, which are that was something that is was non-viable for literally any MechWarrior game up until MechWarrior 5 Mercs, since we were the first MechWarrior game to really introduce melee to it. So those are much more on the table now than they have ever been in the past. But we still need to get to that point in the timeline, and I think that that's one thing about kind of treating this product as onboarding new players so they can get up to speed. Like, hopefully there's enough support for both clans and just MechWarrior in general, that we can kind of bring the user base a bit more in line with the storytelling for those eras, which allow us to go and leverage mechs like the Celestials or the Blood Asp and
or
stuff like that.
even the Dark Age. There's so many cool mechs in the Dark Age. Like
Oh yeah.
the only thing that makes me sad whenever I think of Mech Warriors, I'm like, and I'm never gonna see an Anzu.
Well, I know even CGL is starting to produce Dark Age mechs like the Legionnaire and those popular ones that they're fun.
You did the Hatamoto Chi, didn't you?
Yes. So for those who don't know, I'm not just a designer on MechWarrior 5 Clans, but I also 3D model for Catalyst. Kind of not as much as I used to, since my role has kind of expanded on the MechWarrior team. But I definitely it was definitely a thing to do during the COVID years to keep me busy. So I did produce a number of the new Catalyst game plastic miniatures for both Clan Invasion and the new Beginner's box set. I did the Vindicator, and also a lot of like the Wave, the Mercenary campaign stuff.
I'm just going to have a quick aside for our friends in the audience here. We're 1 hour in. You will all have to forgive me, but I do run this platform. And if you could hit like really helps the stream. We have 233 people watching right now, which is actually pretty bananas.
Actually,
In a direction, somewhere around there, you'll find a like button. It helps if you hit the like button. Other than that, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. I am actually aiming to have more people on over time to talk about Mechwarrior and Battletech, like Chris here. So I really appreciate everybody being here so far today. So let's get back to the fun part here. So, what is your favorite Mechwarrior 5 mech that we're going to see in the game? Your personal favorite?
I mean, it's hard not to say the Timberwolf. Just I know it's the boring answer, but it's got a lot of fun variants that can build a lot of like fun things. Very much like MWO. Unlocking a whole bunch of different omnipods can like really change what the mechs are capable of, and the Timberwolf can go from like a ground pounder with like a bunch of small scale weaponry. It can also carry around a lot of big guns, but it also can be a jumping city fighter if it wants to. So the flexibility of it is just like a lot of fun that a lot of other mechs, like The Hellbringer is also fun, but the problem with the Hellbringer is that it's a lot of gun and not much of anything else.
I love the Hellbringer because it just dies. I always called it a clan Jaegermech. I'm like, look, guys, it's the clan Jaegermech.
So one thing about MechWarrior 5 clans that I think is good is that, like, with MechWarrior 5, with MWO, everything was catered towards PvP, which and also the use of like consumables like cool shots and stuff like that. So I think that one of the mech classes that really suffered in that kind of environment was the gun platform mechs, where like they chose guns over armor because there was kind of effectively a ceiling, like an effective ceiling, where you could never really exceed that ceiling without kind of running afoul of what was in the meta and what is like viable for mechs that effectively can try to do as much as possible. And in MechWarrior 5 Mercs, like for the most part, that game was grounded in Succession War tech, so a lot of the balance was really, trying to make sure that mechs kind of stayed in that Succession War range band, so you didn't just get your first Star League mech and all of a sudden invalidated your entire roster. But with MechWarrior 5 clans, we can definitely, let the clan mechs be clan mechs. So things like the Hellbringer, as Matt showed in one of like the playthrough videos where he did who's the Hellbringer, it could be a lot of fun because you do have that heat capacity to really support those heavy amounts of weapons. You need to learn how to dance around the keyboard a little bit to effectively use all those weapons, but there's a little bit more leeway to kind of build in that direction where you are going for a bit more gun platform builds than we could have supported with both Mercs and in MWO.
Yeah, that is one of the things in MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, where like you could get double heat sinks, but it didn't always feel like you had double heat sinks.
Yeah, and that was a deliberate choice. So for
No,
those who don't know,
it's fine, but I always thought it was really funny. I'm like, I put 10 double heat sinks in this. That means I might be able to fire my energy weapon.
So if you actually ask Jordan Wiseman, what is the one thing that he would change if he could go back and do it all over again? His answer most of the time is that he would prevent you from having double engine heat sinks, because that's like vastly affects the balance in a lot of different ways, and that is kind of what we did in MechWarrior 5 Mercs that I know was controversial in like a lot of ways, but like it was a deliberate design decision on our part, just because like we didn't want to effectively segregate mech collection into those mechs that had those double heat sinks native, and then everything else which was effectively trash by comparison. So it was one of those things that like really kind of kept things grounded in the same power level as everything else.
And like I believe that Randall Mills also feels the same way about double heat sinks, where he's just like, they shouldn't be in the engine. I'm like, it's too late now. It's too late. It's too late now. Give me my ERPPCs. Give me my clan tech ERPs.
Well, so that's the thing, is that like that argument works all the way up till late Succession War tech, where the mechs are still usable with it, but once you get into clan tech with like the amount of heat that a clan ERPPC and clan pulse lasers do, like you need those double heat sinks in the engine. So we're definitely going to be tuning the mechs much more towards catering to that clan play style. So.
But what if I fire all 4 of my ERPPCs on my Warhawk and I want to be seen from space?
You could do that. Like
just disable all the heat sinks.
No. Like, well, you'll definitely have to upgrade some pilot skills. You definitely don't want to go in as a green pilot and do that. But and also pairing it with the right pilot could effectively net you benefits to where you can definitely fire those PPCs off fairly frequently if you want to. It's just that the cooldowns on the PPCs themselves are very long. So.
I love in the tabletop game, if you do fire all 4 PPCs with your LRM-10 and the Prime Warhawk, there's a very good chance you just explode. Because like you'll cook off your LRM-10 ammo. There's like a really good chance you just eat 110 damage in the first volley. All right, I fired this turn. What happens? Well, I missed with half my weapons, but I removed all the outer armor from your arm. Okay, what happens to you? My ammunition explodes. Uh, prove Big Red wrong? No. I can't ask questions that would spoil the game. They will prove me wrong tomorrow. They will prove me wrong tomorrow. Um, how did you decide on the meta game design? I think we just kind of answered that.
Well, I mean, I can't really say that much on clans because that wasn't necessarily my role on clans. I can talk you to death about it on Mercs. But like as far as just the general design, like a lot of it came down to what we needed for the clans and to make that experience as a clanner much more unique. So things are definitely going to be different from Mechwarrior 5 Mercs. So don't expect like a complete one-to-one translation from the Merc mechanics into the clan mechanics, but it's very much catered to the clan experience. So for example, like a good example of that is that in Succession War era mercenaries, you're scrounging around for like weapons all the time. Like you get your arm blown off with your tier 5 pulse laser.
Oh God.
Like you're going to be looking for another pulse laser for quite a bit because it's the Succession Wars, and they haven't reintroduced that tech yet. Clans don't have that kind of problem. You are not a scrappy little star, with the weight of the world on you. You are a cog in the much larger clan armada, and so stuff like that would have been incredibly rare in Mercs is just commonplace in clans. So like the experience is definitely going to be different.
So here's a question I think I can ask. How long do you guys expect to take to complete the game in its first playthrough?
Oh, I don't know. In honesty, like I'm actually waiting on
you skipping no cinematics or anything like that. Just
I think it's tough because I think we like clock in at around 15 to 20 hours on our side, but that's with us kind of knowing the general mechanics of the metagame and stuff like that. So like for us, we know like what clan or like what
this is the part of the story where this
do.
happens.
Yeah.
This is so you actually know the level beforehand.
Yeah, so like there's going to be a variable amount of time that you're going to be spending in the mech lab, and that's going to drastically affect just how much. Because like here's like kind of an interesting thing, for you guys. Like I'm sure everyone in this audience is very much accustomed to the mech lab and kind of getting the builds that you want, but that is. There are, a subset of, mercenaries players that just stick with stock builds and don't even bother with Mech Lab
Really?
at all.
There are?
Yep.
No, that can't be
Like
true.
they'll gravitate towards mechs that they feel more comfortable in. So you get a lot of Thunderbolts that are considered really good mechs in comparison to everything else. But like to them, it's the Mech Lab can be deterred because of just how complicated it is. So to that end, in Mechwarrior 5 clans, that you can effectively swap out between the baseline Omnipod sets and just like go. So if a player is basically just like, you know what, like my Timberwolf Prime, I know this build loadout, like the back of my hand, and I don't even need to mess around with the Mech Lab. I'm just gonna jump in my Timberwolf and go. Like those guys are going to probably blaze through the game a lot faster than the people who are going to.
Yeah, somebody's going to
the Mech Lab.
customize their my Timberwolf replaces its LRMs with SRMs or something like that, right? Yeah, no, I get you.
Yeah.
Question from longtime channel follower, Chapter Master Moloch. Are there going to be bondsmen in the game?
Not going to say it.
Oh, see, I tried, Moloch, I tried.
Like I've said before, we're catering the story experience to your core cast of 5 mech warriors. We're going to touch on as much clanisms as we can, as we feel like we need to tell the story that we're going to tell. But there are going to be some cuts, for things that people would have loved to see that are going to have to be on the side for right now because they either didn't really fit within the context of the experience with this particular star. I guess like one example I'll toss out is like clan bidding, for example. Like we definitely say it happens in the story, and we're not going to shy away from that being a part of clan culture. So it is mentioned, but within the context of your star being a bunch of fresh recruits from Sipcos that only has like a position of star commander, like you're not at um a level within the clan society that you would be the one actually bidding on stuff.
Yeah, it would be a
So
star captain or a colonel or
yeah,
somebody above your pay grade.
yeah, exactly. Like the bidding is what happens at like effectively the star colonel and the galaxy commander tier, and you are effectively like their cog to get done. So we'll definitely mention that as something that exists. But it's not something that the players themselves are really going to experience within the context, because it's just not necessarily something that star commanders and standard mech warriors really recruit. They're the guys waiting in the rooms with the little beepers with the red lights on.
Can pilots be injured in combat?
No, not to the same degree as mercs. So in mercs, pilots were a commodity. So to kind of go with the entire mercenary experience, your player character couldn't get injured, and the everyone else who wasn't you was considered a commodity that needed to effectively be a resource that was both grinded and also look for replacements, to up the pilot skills and stuff like that. Not the case with Mechwarrior 5 clans. So it is very much a linear story with a set cast of characters, and because of that, like we can't have someone just get randomly injured and all of a sudden the next mission that you're playing, like they play a key part of that particular mission. So for the most part, we're pretty much saying, hey, you're part of a clan armada, you have superior clan tech where they can regrow limbs, so yeah, you'll take that.
It's terrible.
You'll take that.
If you had narrative control and you're just patrolling your own star members every battle. It's like, yeah, I just patrolled my own guy. I need a new point. What? Yeah, I killed Liam.
Oh yeah, so
that was the last contraction he missed.
I definitely have seen a few comments basically saying, I can't wait to throw him into the reactor.
I'm sorry, I just thought of that while you're giving the answer. I'm like, can you imagine if this game was so open that it let you just doom your own playthrough? It's like, yeah, so I killed 3 of my star mates. It's like, what are you doing? They didn't have replacements for you. It's fine.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I warned you about cleaning up your language. That's terrible. Let's see here. I bid only myself.
No, that's not up for you. Your what is it? Your star colonel tells you to deploy as a star. You're deploying as a star.
Ray Arastia says they died with honor. Now I need to restart the game. Oh boy.
Hey Ray, how's it going?
Question: in the launch trailer, there was the line, "Are we go for the invasion?" Was that a Mech Commander reference?
I'll take it. Truth be told, that was just a happy accident. Like there are those lines that we try to deliberately see it in there, but that was I am more than willing to admit that was just a happy accident on my part.
Curtis, I tried to ask the question about the second line mechs earlier in the interview, and the answer is nondescript. So
yeah.
There you go.
Ask me in 2 days.
We will be able to ask these questions in approximately 48 hours.
Yep. So I do see Grand Potato, physical copy. We are not saying anything yet. Obviously, that's going to depend on support of the initial release. But Russ has tweeted on Twitter before that it is a possibility, but it's going to be post-launch. It's not a guaranteed thing, but it is a possibility that might happen at some point in time after release.
So, question for you. This is an interesting one. Who is your favorite faction in BattleTech?
Oh, it's going to be tough for me to deny that I'm a Ghost Bear at heart.
Oh, good on ya.
Yeah. It's funny because like that particular faction, like when I got into it, there wasn't really that much fiction. It was really just things like the source books and everything like that. But then as like they started filling out the fiction, they just got better in my opinion, especially like during the Combine Civil War and stuff like that, and also like their integration into Rasselhague.
Oh, the Rosselhague Dominion was such a cool idea. I love the first and second Rosselhague. Sorry, the first and second Dominion Combine Wars. The thing that made me a Ghost Bear fan, though, Ghost Bear's Legacy. Just can't help it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that intro is always a classic. I so
There's
actually,
a smoke Jaguar in that intro.
So, funny thing, not only did I do the Odiac for Catalyst, but I also did the illustration for the TROs. So,
Oh, nice.
Grant, I'm not sure if you can pull that up or anything like that. But yeah, I definitely threw in a Ghost Bear's Legacy reference into that illustration.
Let's see if I can pull this up. It's not a humongous image, because I'm pulling this just from Sarna really quickly. If I go here and I go to there, there is the Kodiak for everybody to see, the TRO image. I see some wreckage. I see some wreckage in this image.
Here, I'm going to try to pull up. I have a web version that I'm allowed to post on Twitter for that. That'll give you like the full illustration. So, for those who don't know, for like those TRO illustrations, we always don't know what the aspect ratio is because sometimes they'll stick a bunch of stats if the mech has a lot of variance on it, and sometimes they'll do the full page spread. So, like we have to tend to like build out a little bit extra for depending on what they do. So,
Free birth! As they just get absolutely smashed. It's awesome. Richard, we were talking about Ghost Bear fiction. We weren't talking about general BattleTech fiction.
Okay. Here. Sorry, I was just digging it out. I need to.
It's all right.
During
during this time, I'm just going to stare at the audience. I'm going to stare at them all. They can know I'm judging them. Just kidding.
Okay, just sent you the full illustration in chat.
Oh, there. Oh, I see what you did. I see what you did. Let's hope that this doesn't mess this up. It didn't. All right, we did it. All right. That's a cool image. Okay. I will mess around with this so everybody can see this. It's a much better resolution too, everybody. Boom. I love the Kodiak. It's a mech that people have repeatedly asked me to cover, but I'm waiting for there to be more like Ghost Bear fiction out, because I did a video on the Executioner, which is literally married to the Kodiak in terms of its backstory. Like they have dual development, like they're meant to complement one another. And like I'm like, guys, I did like a 3-hour video on Clan Ghost Bear's history with the Executioner. I'm like, if I make a Kodiak video right now, it would just be the same video. Like, I gotta wait for something else to come out for me to make this video meaningfully matter when I eventually do it. So it'll be a year or two probably before I do the Kodiak.
Yep.
But yeah, just a beautiful mech. And now that we've been on that side tangent, I'm gonna jump back over to the screen. Yes. I only did it because it was for the Kodiak. I did it all for the Kodiak. Is the Battletech universe book worth it? Yes. If you want to see a coherent, broad picture narrative of the Battletech universe, I believe it is worth it. Yes.
Yep. And just to kind of throw that out there for the Mechwarrior 5 Clans fans, the digital extras will eventually have some lore history and stuff for those who um, haven't really got their own source materials from the original Battletech run. So we are working on some articles for like the history of the clans and some faction descriptions for some of like the wider things that are shown in the game. Those won't make the initial launch of the game only because we will be localizing that content into all of our supported languages since it can be viewed in game. But expect that as part of the post-release support for the TRO stuff.
Very cool. I always like more lore stuff. I'll read it. I'm there for it.
Yeah,
I'm here for it.
yeah.
Uh,
No, if you read a lot of the books, it's probably gonna say a lot of the stuff that you already know. But for those who want to pretty much have an all-encompassing experience within the MechWarrior 5 Clans client, we're going to be definitely working to, or it's making that extra digital extras purchase that much worth it.
yeah, you guys are including like the soundtrack and art book and some other stuff in there too. Um,
Yep.
the soundtrack so far sounds very appropriate. It sounds um, obviously it doesn't sound like MechWarrior 2, but it does sound a lot closer to being like an homage to it in some ways, with like
Yeah.
some of the wah stuff like that's in there. It's interesting.
Yeah. So a little bit of history into the development of this stuff. MechWarrior 5's production started pre Microsoft Activision merger. So when we were initially scoping this out and kind of making this game, uh, doing direct translations of the stuff from MechWarrior 2 was off the table when it came to the initial planning of the game, since the merger came much later into production. But that's definitely something that is much more on the table now for future content moving forward, just not for this particular release. But we did Sean Colton, our composer, definitely did try to create something original, but within the same spiritual vein as MechWarrior 2, as one of the major inspirations for this particular game soundtrack.
My favorite MechWarrior soundtrack is like, and this is just as all out of all of them, and I'll include BattleTech, which I thought had a great soundtrack too. But my
Mm-hmm.
favorite MechWarrior soundtrack is still Ghostfire's Legacy.
Yep.
Like I can't help it. It's so good. Let's see here. Um, I don't think he can answer that, Mark Chambers, but I'll give it a try. How much of a say does Microsoft have in the games?
I mean, I don't know the specifics for that, but I can tell you that from my perspective, I haven't had any, kind of directives from on high outside of Piranha Games. So for the most part, if that is something that's just coming through, Russ's or production's directives, I don't know. But to my knowledge, we pretty much have full license to, do what we feel is best. As long as we're doing it in the best interests of the IP.
Will Papa Roach be in the soundtrack?
Nope. So what I think that like that does bring up kind of like a an interesting subject in regards to like just the history of MechWarrior and Mech Assault in the case of the Papa Roach stuff. But the the thing to remember is that like because this IP really did get left on the vine for so long, um, there really is not much in the way of like support Piranha Games self-produces both MechWarrior 5 Mercs and MechWarrior 5 Clans. So we're not really like operating within the same kind of budget that a lot of people that can throw those
Yeah.
big names out there, which is unfortunate. But that's one of the things that because I know that there's been a lot of feedback with the recent trailer for Clans as far as like an upgrade, and I really want to stress that that's because of the support that you guys all showed to the MechWarrior 5 base product and all the DLC expansions that we were allowed to pretty much self-publish a game like Clans within our own operating budget. Does that mean that MechWarrior could sometimes like eventually get to the point where it could be a AAA production budget again? I hope for future products, but for right now we're very much like we need to kind of forge our own destiny and work within our own kind of more AA budget territory, and we hope you guys do enjoy what we have been able to cobble together independently.
Even for double A budget games right now, like this is just my own commentary. You'll forgive me for kind of including this, but like the way I look at it is like budgetary restraints are actually often a good thing. Like I know I had the question earlier, kind of asking if you had an unlimited budget, but in a like even though I know it doesn't feel like it, obviously, but if we look back at like a lot of the best films or a lot of the best video games of their time, they tend to be things where there was an edge of desperation.
Yeah,
They tend to be things where it's like
it's a double-edged sword. It's kind of like putting on weight. My elderly dog is like struggling to keep on weight now that he's like 15, and we were just at the vet the other day, and they had like the good analogy of like too little amount of weight is bad because he loses muscle mass. Too much weight is bad because he just becomes too fat and it's tough for him to walk around. So you need to find something in the middle, and I think that game production is very similar. Like you can have an IP that and I think that this is like where kind of like the Mechwarrior IP has been for a bit, is that I think that as far as the audience goes, there's grand ambitions that this really should be like an elite tier product in the upper echelons of game production or storytelling or all these various other things. But we're definitely, we wish we were there, but we definitely have to work within the bounds of what we're able to do. And the fact that MechWarrior Online and MechWarrior 5 has been able to support themselves for so long is directly because of support from people like you, but we have been also very conservative with making sure that we are producing things at an even tilt to where we can continue to have an eye towards continuing to produce this content. Like a good example of that would be, I know that a lot of people wanted MechWarrior 5 Clans to be just a regular expansion for MechWarrior 5 Mercs, rather than its own standalone product. And if we were to pretty much produce it as a DLC expansion, that would have meant that we would have had to stay within the budget of one of the DLC expansions. So you're talking about probably a handful of levels. Only a handful of mechs and probably like not that many mechanics. So is that really what people want out of that experience?
And you also you changed engines too. This is clearly a graphically superior game. Like everything looks better about the game, to be quite frank. Like of course you have all the motion capture. You have tons of genuine storytelling. Like I like the DLC from MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, but like no. It's like, no, like I remember it was quite early on in an interview, like of MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, even where Russ said if there was going to be a clan game, it would be a different game. It wouldn't be the same one.
No, I'm really glad that we got the opportunity to make our own game for that, because if it was effectively an expansion for Mercs, it would have been a very different product, but also it would have had a very different budget, because we're effectively producing DLC for what is now like almost a 5-year-old product, rather than producing something that is meant for a brand new title.
So I'm going to ask a couple questions here, just because we're 90 minutes in, and there is only so much that we can ask because of the nature of the game not being out yet. It's so close, though. It's so very close. So I have 3 key questions I always like to ask guests, at least at some point. Now, one of these might be a little bit more difficult to answer, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to ask it anyway. What is the thing that you are most proud of, that you, in terms of the narrative, that you worked on for MechWarrior 5 Clans?
I have to say the warships in general.
They look spectacular.
Well, just because like getting back to budgets in gaming, like there's always kind of this notion that the smart money is to always put stuff that engages in actual gameplay. And so it is always a really tough ask to basically say, hey guys, can we build these massive ships that have nothing to do with actual gameplay and everything to do with just, the cinematics? And it's a really tough sell, and so for us to not just make one or two warships, but an entire fleet for the Armada with like all the jump ship support and everything like that, I'm very thankful that the team like got behind that vision, because like that that could have easily been an extra playable mech or an extra bit of content that would be like more forward facing, but it is so vital to the storytelling within clans to see like the full impact of like
It's
the
the
Armada
atmosphere.
versus exactly, like in Mechwarrior Mercs, and even in Harebrained Schemes Battletech, you see one or two jump ships because in the Succession Wars that is like they're rare commodities, but to really sell, the scope of the clan invasion, like I really, really pushed to, to make sure that we, felt like that Armada was as imposing, like in our game as it was in universe. And I'm really glad that, I'm really proud that the team came together and actually delivered on that, because I know what a substantial ask it was for me to go and say, let's make like 10 or 12 different ships that aren't going to affect actual gameplay at all.
So this one, and it doesn't just have to apply to Mech 5 clans, this is just in general. What is the thing that you think you didn't get right in a game? Oh.
That well, so
I like to ask people what their highest high is, but I also like to ask what's on the opposite side of that.
So the thing is that like in game development, you're always going to have to compromise. Like you're always going to have to pretty much say, like I, for example, when I first got the narrative director position for Kestrel Lancers, I would have loved to be able to throw like a budget, that we were doing for Mechwarrior 5 plans into the Kestrel Lancers as just like a solid expansion. Never going to happen. And so from there on out, you do have to kind of, just a part of game production is you have to come together as a team and pretty much determine, okay, like where are you going to allocate these resources? Because you only have so much time to get, to certain spots. And it's one of those things where like, I've got my, my regrets for every product that I've produced, where I just basically go, oh man, I really wish I could have fixed this up. But the reality of it is that those things happen because like you're either running low on time, you're running low on resources, and you have to come together and as a team decide what is important for the product itself. And I think that ultimately, as regretful as I am for some of the cuts, and that I really wish that I could have gotten in there, I do think that ultimately those things were the right call, given given the circumstances
Yep.
around those particular productions. So as much as they personally hurt me,
Oh yeah,
that is
it doesn't have to be like
oh
the
yeah.
thing didn't work. It's just like because like I go through that myself when I work on certain videos. Like I cut content that I'm just like this is just it's something I would love to have, but this just it won't work here. And
Well,
I did either all this recording or I did all this writing, and it was pointless.
so here's a great example of that. I think enough time has passed that I can tell this story.
Oh boy.
For for call to for the third expansion for MechWarrior 5, Call to Arms, like that was initially going to be the Rise of Rasselhag campaign. If you look at all the hero mechs that we produce with Call to Arms, there is pretty much there's Alexander Kurita's Hatamotochi. There is a Rasselhag's quick draw, like everything
Yeah.
centered on Rise of Rasselhag, because like the initial intent of those hero mechs were they're going to be campaign rewards, very similar to Heroes of the Inner Sphere. But the axe came down for that particular expansion because of the point in time that we were at, and like producing those story campaigns is a massive budget. And at the time when we only had Kestrel Lancers to really judge ourselves against, we didn't realize how long the legs were going to be on those things, and so it was a big risk to pretty much continue to produce it. So the axe came down on like literally the entirety of the Russellhage campaign
Oh God.
for DLC for DLC 3. But call to arms. Like I know that it gets a lot of flack in the community, but like the support for that particular DLC combined with Kestrel Lancers is what drove us, to pretty much go, well, like, okay, what does a fourth DLC look like, if we were to do it? And, like, you raise your hand and go, hey, we did all this work on the Rosselhag campaign. How about we reopen that can of worms? And that is, like, ultimately what, started the entire Rosselhag DLC, was that it really was kind of like the leftovers that got cut from one expansion. And, because of support, we were able to circle back around and do that.
Realistically speaking, the best part about it is that's the one that you're allowed to help the entire nation of Swedish chefs finally cook the meal they wanted. But so I have one other question before I ask my last question, because this one I actually thought was really interesting. It came up in the chat. How many copies do we need to buy before we get another MechCon?
I would love to. Well, okay, so Ray here is in chat from Catalyst. One thing that I always regretted about the MechCons at the time was that when we did the MechCons, it was just Mechwarrior product. It was, for the most part, when Mechwarrior Online was in its heyday, it was when Mechwarrior 5 got announced, and to a lesser degree, it was also HBS when they were like ramping up on their Battletech. And Catalyst, you guys showed up, and we were glad to have you on those MechCons. But at the MechCons, it was before Catalyst relaunched the tabletop game, so it was prior to a game of Armored Combat with like the latest miniatures. They actually brought the prototypes for the miniatures to the MechCons and showed them off and had tables running with it. But it was prior to the relaunch of the tabletop side of things, and I think that if we were to do another MechCon, like I think that it's definitely something I would love to see. A lot more of just like the Battletech IP itself kind of come together and get done, not just because of we're in much different spots than where we were before, but also like Catalyst themselves have had a lot of success, and they're the ones with the life-size urban mech. We don't have a life-size urban mech yet.
You imagine it's just outside of Russ's house. Everyone's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "This is mine." It's mine.
Oh yeah, no, I'll bug Randall to get that thing out into Vancouver or something. But yeah, so
yeah, I'm a BC boy, so I'd love to see it out there.
Yeah, I would love to do another MechCon, but it is one of those things where we're in a much different spot than where we were. Who knows? Never say never. I would love to see it again, but it comes down to support of not just our product, but I imagine Catalyst product at this point in time.
So, the final meaningful question that we're going to be asking. Do you have anything you'd like to say to the general audience who's been playing Mechwarrior for these last few years? Do you have any final words you want to give?
Well, just these 2 years?
Oh, no, I said few years. I didn't say 2 years.
Oh, few years. Okay. Ultimately, thanks for the support, guys. Mechwarrior 5 Clans wouldn't be as big as it is at this point in time without your support of the previous Mechwarrior products that PGI has produced, both Mechwarrior Online and Mechwarrior 5 Mercs and all of its supporting DLCs. So we hope that you guys really enjoy it. We are still hard at work trying to launch clans in less than 20 hours now, and we are continuing to work on getting those digital extras up and running and taking a scope of what's coming next afterwards, and hopefully we can make this the biggest MechWarrior launch yet.
I hope it is the biggest Mechwarrior launch yet. I hope you guys surpass Mechwarrior 2. I really do. Like, I really hope that this game is a massive success. I am biased.
Oh yes,
I am biased for wanting that, but no, sincerely, thank you for all of the incredible work that you've done on MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries in terms of the narrative campaigns. Thank you for being here today. You certainly didn't need to accept my invitation to come on tonight.
yes.
And it was a blast having you on. It really was, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And yeah, we're all. I can guarantee you the team is just as excited to get the product out to you guys as you are to play it. So we're looking forward to the launch tomorrow.
So just as a final couple notes to everyone in the audience, first of all, the stream is going to be left up. This will be under live on the channel, so you will still find this here, and it won't be unlisted. It's going to remain live. Second of all, if you enjoyed your time here with us today, don't forget to hit like. It does actually help the stream, I promise. And finally, I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. I'm going to live stream this game basically until I beat it. So, unless I have to sleep. But I'm going to be playing the hell out of it. And you guys will all know if I think that they succeeded or not in terms of crafting something special. I certainly hope they did, and it certainly looks like they did. But we'll know for sure in about 20 hours.
Oh yes.
So, with that being said... Oh, no, go ahead.
And then I can talk about all the things that you guys want. We don't want to.
I think we got a lot of meaningful questions in tonight. I actually do.
Oh yes.
But there we go. We'll catch you guys all. Well, I will catch you guys all next time.
Yep. Later on, guys.